Good afternoon, everyone. Today, at the Build for a Forum, we talk about user segmentation. I think often in the forum and definitely outside of it, we constantly hear that in order to build for women, founders and startups need to build contextualized, tailored solutions, customized solutions. And I think one of the fundamental aspects of doing this that is less spoken about is really user segmentation. As a product developer, as a founder, how do I narrow down who my target customer is? And once I do that, what kind of attributes do I focus on in order to make sure that I am able to design bespoke customer journeys? So, Urmi, within her work at Swadhaar FinAct, where she mainly works with delivering, designing and delivering financial capability enhancement modules for women in rural India, has taken this question very much in her stride and has worked on it very meticulously, experimenting on different variables, different attributes, different segments of women to arrive at a succinct sort of an actionable framework that startups, founders, product developers, financial service providers across the spectrum can adopt in order to better understand women in their customer segments and eventually serve them better. So as usual, today we'll have a 45-minute session. Urmi will speak for about 20-25 minutes, after which we can open the house for questions. And meantime, while Urmi is speaking, if folks have questions, please key in your questions in the chat box and we'll take those up once the talk is concluded. With that, over to you, Urmi.
Thank you. Thanks, Trisha. I know we've had some interesting conversations around this, so I think we're very happy for this opportunity to share some of the work we've been doing at seeing some of what we find, sharing it with a different set of stakeholders is a very intriguing prospect to also hear back from all of you. And I do have a presentation that I'll start with soon. I think my colleague Rohit is going to help me navigate through that. But as we pull that up, I think I also wanted to share that for us, this entire idea of segmentation, as we looked at it, we were very keen to say, how do you actually look at this idea and build it in a way where it's not just an abstract concept? When we say tailored solutions, the first question that comes to mind is the kind of resources needed to design tailored solutions, to execute them, to deliver them. And what we wanted to take is a point of view that this doesn't necessarily need to be done by anyone delivering a product or a service or an intervention, but that actually, if we approach this research with this actionable perspective in mind, we can derive insights that become applicable and replicable across many contexts. And so that's a little bit of the point of view we took. And I'll look forward to all your questions and thoughts. And I think for us, we're very excited to see what you share back with us. Rohit, you can share in the presentation. Thank you. So today, what we wanted to share a bit, I'll share just a quick background also on Swadhaar's own work, what we do as part of our core training work across India, and how that's given us also this opportunity to really get that deep understanding of the customer and be able to deliver and create some of these insights. We'll go a little bit into almost the why of the user segmentation, why we chose this as an area of focus. Within that, while it's behavior led, it's also focused on financial agency. And I'll cover a little bit of why we feel that financial agency is really that catalytic kind of component in the financial journey for these women. I'll share a little bit. This has been almost a 1.5 year long journey for us, some of this research and how it has built. Every step has built on the past step that we've undertaken. I'll share a little bit about what we found and how we've done that, and arriving at a bit of where we are in terms of some of the insights we've collated. how we're looking at sharing those out. And really, I think what we'd love to hear more on is what we envision as some of the value proposition and use cases for this. Sorry, I think there's what we see as value propositions and use cases for this, and how we want to really take that into different stakeholders. Rohit, if you can just go ahead. So to share a little bit, if I can just request everyone listening to go on mute, please. Sorry, just so there's no, thank you. For us at Swadhaar, we've been doing this really. We're one of the few nonprofits in the country that focus primarily on financial capability building. We've been doing this for close to 19 years. Our programs now cover 184 locations, primarily in partnership with the RBI's MoneyWise program, and we run CFLs as a part of that. We've trained over 7 million customers since inception, and annually our outreach is to 4 million. And we say customers, I mean participants who attend our trainings. These are direct trainings one-on-one with customers who attend them. We use a mix of in-person and digital tools to conduct these trainings. And really, it's an entire cycle of the training itself, hand-holding, post-training, linking customers with products. We've linked close to 600,000 of these customers with financial products, largely public sector products, help them activate dormant products, and really help them engage with the system better. A lot of what we've done here, and we currently work across these 4 states in India. Primarily, our work is in rural areas and particularly focusing on remote and tribal regions in parts of Jharkhand, Bihar. Yeah, you can go. Thank you. Our programs, we have 3 key core programs that we run. Like I said, the RBI MoneyWise Centers for Financial Literacy are a bulk of our direct outreach through B2C trainings. We also run a B2B model through which we work with partner nonprofits. And that also has been a really interesting way for us to test how we can take content that we've designed, interventions that we've designed, and actually share them with partners working across a multitude of different sectors. And a lot of this work comes together really for us under Swadhaar FinAcc, which is our research hub. We layer this on really across most of our interactions with customers to build this human-centered approach. And through FinAcc, we do it. Our FinAcc program is in partnership with the Gates Foundation. The approach we really took in this through our trainings and the connects that we have with the customer on the ground. While we often in most delivery mechanisms, that rural segment of customers is seen as one segment, as this homogeneous group to say designed for rural customers. But we strongly feel with the insight that we've had that it's not a one size fits all solution. And through the work in FinAcc, we want to look at the intersection of inclusion, of how people learn, build their capacity, build that trust and confidence to engage with financial services. And within that, also taking a particular focus on gender, of the role of the woman within this, how we can use a behavior-led, human-centered approach to really understand that customer better. And that's the crux of the work we do at FinAcc. I think going back to what I was saying when I started, for us, it's very key that we also see ourselves as researchers who very strongly have one foot on the ground as also implementers, and really keeping in mind that practicality of any of the work we do. Like if you've arrived at an insight, making sure we look at the then what happens to it. How do you replicate that? How do you scale that? How do you take that balance of making tailored, customized solutions that are still standardized enough to replicate in our own programs? We work with 400 different trainers. understanding how that can actually be tested in through testing in our networks, we look at how it can be scalable. And I just wanted to share, and we will be putting the link into the chat as well. A lot of this work is available on our microsite called Swadhaar FinAcc. We have a research series called Banking on Her, in which we've also have the reports on all of this research that's done. So I wanted to then go into a little bit of the customer herself and really the why of us wanting to take that deeper look at the customer. And I think as for all of us as part of being people enabling customers in the financial services ecosystem, we know how this last decade, the kind of revolution we've seen, the multitude of services that are actually available to customers in the palm of their hands. And we've at Swadhaar seen how this has changed in the 2 decades that we worked, how for the customer it's gone from struggling to be able to open a bank account to now actually figuring out of the 20 options, which is the right one for me? How do I engage with these services? And we still feel that particularly for rural underserved customers, there is that gap that they have. It's both a psychological distance that they have from financial services, as well as a distance created by a lack of just the basic abilities to understand digital literacy, financial literacy, and that lack of infrastructure. And that gap is something that we work to close and at Swadhaar, but also through this research, we want to really see how we can move that customer from not just access, but to actual product uptake and usage. Yeah, next slide, please, Rohit. At our own theory of change, and this is really saying why we chose financial agency as that key catalytic theme for this research, and we felt that it's very key to making that customer move ahead in her journey. And we see this 3-step process in our own theory of change in our work, where it really begins with awareness, just that basic understanding of building a relevance for financial management in your life. What are the kinds of products that are available to me? Who are the other people around me who are actually a part of similar journeys that I can draw support from, that I can be linked to? Who are the people I can ask questions to about different types of products or services or even process? Moving from that to access, now that I know what I'm able to get, I take the next step to actually connect myself to those services. What is the kind of support needed there? What is the range of products that's available to me that is suitable to my different needs? And what are the different ways that I can get them? And when that comes, then we are able to move that customer into an aspect of agency where there starts to become, we start to bring in the idea of making decisions, making choices. And we do see this at Swadhaar also not as a linear process. It's not one final endpoint of agency for everyone, but really this cyclical motion which helps someone move forward on their journey. I go through this circle, I take that first step, and I'm able to now move forward in my journey towards resilience. And in that final, the movement towards resilience, long term for the household, we really see that as families being able to access a combination of different products, being able to withstand different shocks and emergencies by having the right kinds of products, by having enough savings, by access to insurance. And over time, because of this process, also the right kind of product fit. So, products that are designed to meet their specific needs and process delivery systems that actually take their needs into account and help really bridge that gap and take them towards this resilience. Yeah, next slide, Rohit. And, I think it goes without saying, and anyone who's worked directly with customers knows that, there's such a vast range. For us at Swadhaar, we also, a lot of our experienced trainers will come back and instinctively they know that some women are quieter, are more intimidated by some of the messages, and you need to talk to them differently. And I just wanted to share a couple of small clips to bring this to light. Rohit, if you can just play that. I think you'll have to share sound, Rohit. Is it Are you able to hear?
बचत करती
Yeah, go
मेरे
ahead.
पास बैंक का खाता नहीं है और मोबाइल भी नहीं है मेरे पास। और मैं घर में ही बचत करती हूँ और बैंक के बारे पता नहीं है। से हम फोन पे चलाते हैं, जैसे हम दुकान चल गए, मेरे हाथ में पैसा नहीं है और वहां पे हमको पैसा देना होता है तो फिर हम मोबाइल से देते हैं, वहां पे पे करते हैं। जैसे साड़ी खरीदे तो हम फोन पे कर दिए, तेल खरीदे तो हम फोन पे कर दिए।
So I think, these two women live in the same village. They've attended the same kinds of trainings in the past. And for us, we realize that when we work with them on capacity building, our trainers are instinctively understanding that each of them needs a different kind of nudge post training. Someone who's already using digital tools, if I talk to her about simple savings, about very simple next steps, to her that's something she's already done. She doesn't see that excitement of building her capabilities, of doing something more that can add to her skill set. Whereas for someone who does not even have a bank account or has a dormant account that she's not very aware of, talking to her about digital payments becomes overwhelming, becomes she's something where she says this is not really for me and switches off from the entire conversation. And so this is some of the what we wanted to tackle through the segmentation, almost to say but there is always going to be this range of customer, often in the same village, often living within 100 meters of each other. And so how do you create ways to understand how we can locate the customer into these segments and then design the right kind of nudge and eventually the right kind of customer engagement tool, the right kind of delivery system for that customer. And within this, we see agency again as that ability to take choices, to make choices, to take decisions, and particularly for the woman to start to be heard and have a greater contribution in household decision making as well. And I think, yeah, this idea of taking part in household decision making, but also what we're very excited about is moving customers to that seeking mindset. As you build that trust and confidence, there is this idea to almost say that now I know that there is this almost this universe of different options that's available to me. I want more. I want to know more information. I want to take that next step. And that really becomes the almost that engine of change to kickstart that cycle of awareness to agency for different customers. And I think for us, we're always very excited when we see that click for participants, see that confidence start to come in through different touch points and start to happen. And next slide, Rohit. I wanted to talk a little bit about the research itself, the approach we took, and it's a mix. I'm going to go through a little bit of the process we followed and some of the insights that we derived. Any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Rohit, if you can just go ahead. We wanted to start our foundation to the segmentation was building out the user personas. And to do this, we started with a very detailed longitudinal survey. We did this over a 6-month period and we looked at 100 households. We talked to the entire household with a particular focus on the woman within this. We had 3 different touch points with the family over that 6-month period. And through this process, and you will see in the photograph some of the tools we used a different range of various interactive tools. Rohit, you can go to the next slide. As you can see here as well, these questions covered everything from just basic family dynamics, the kind of financial access that there was within the family, which different family members had different kinds of products, what the cash flow looked like, how decision making happened, and we even mapped this down to different aspects of household budgets, who was taking decisions, who held actually the money and the decision within the family. And what we arrived at and what we've used really as a core definition for the persona that we build out is this idea to say that really financial agency comes from the 2 aspects of what the woman's external dominating context is. In some cases, This is a overpowering household structure. Typically, you will see where the power lies, maybe with the husband, with the mother-in-law, and how that determines her dependence, her mobility, and her ability really to step out and take decisions, and also her self-efficacy, which is really that ability that she has to take decisions, to form her own behavior outside of other influences and be able to take steps on that. And we really looked at the way that these two came together in the context of financial decision making and arrived at a mapping of what financial agency looked like. And you will see these two circles that form the outside context and the internal efficacy. You will see that across many of our different research reports as well as in the presentation here. And I just wanted to stop for a second and share actually what our personas were. We looked at 4 different key personas that emerged from this. The passive observer, this is typically the younger Bahu in a family. She is a little more protected, more hesitant, and more her decision making is largely determined by the male and older female members inside the family. The frustrated fighter is someone who is perhaps a little older, does some work outside of the house, wants to take that next step, but doesn't really have access to the resources or the support or the peer support to actually do that, and is still dealing with a fairly dominating context within the family. The indifferent manager is a really interesting persona where it's someone who's actually has fairly strong self-efficacy. This often ends up being, could be a woman whose husband works outside the village as a migrant laborer. So the money comes in, she's maybe even managing household budgets, but there's not a very high relevance of finance in her life. I'm making small payments, I'm running the household, I'm even perhaps on WhatsApp, I'm watching entertainment on YouTube, but I don't want to get into money. Ye mere liye nahi hai. I don't understand. I get scared by the idea of money, or I don't see its relevance in my life. And then we have the influencer who often ends up being that older role model within the family, but particularly with the financial influencers, they tend to be women who are SHG group or federation leaders, Jivika workers. They can be small business owners within the village. And they are, while they're dealing with a set of restrictions also, they are more confident, they're more experienced, and overall more hopeful about making that next step. And I think it's also, as in some of our research, while we've looked at individual characteristics and behaviors for each of these, it's very fascinating to also track how they come together and the interactions between personas. We'll just quickly, Rohit, if you can just play the videos. I wanted to share a few clips that really bring to light some of how, if you also look at the pictures and the way the family members are sitting around each of them, it really gives you a sense of how these personas manifest.
दीदी, आपके परिवार में कितने सदस्य हैं?
9 है ना, 9 है।
9 सदस्य हैं। और आपके घर के अधिकतर चीजों में निर्णय कौन लेते हैं?
सर पति
लेते हैं।
क्या आप बाजार अकेले जाते हैं या किसी के साथ में जाते हैं?
मेरे पति के साथ जाते हैं।
पैसों से संबंधित जो भी काम होता है घर में कौन निर्णय लेता है?
मेरा पति लेता है।
आपका बैंक का क्या नाम है और कहाँ है?
बैंक ऑफ इंडिया।
आप बैंक अकेले जाते हैं कि किसके साथ ही?
मेरा पति के साथ जाते हैं।
क्या आप बाजार जाते हैं या किसी के साथ जाते हैं या अकेले जाते हैं?
कभी कभार किसी के साथ में भी जाते हैं, नहीं तो अकेले भी जाते हैं जरूरत पड़ने पर।
आपने कोई सरकारी योजना लिया है क्या? उसके बारे में थोड़ी जानकारी बताइए।
सरकारी योजना तो आज तक हमको नहीं मिला है।
बीमा, अटल पेंशन, ये सब
हम बीमा कराए हैं।
गूगल पे एक नेट बैंकिंग है। नेट बैंकिंग होता क्या है कि मतलब हम लोग बैलेंस चेक करने के लिए या फिर पैसा निकालने के लिए हम लोग को जाना पड़ता है, मतलब बैंक। लेकिन गूगल पे में ऐसा नहीं होता है। गूगल पे में होता है कि आप अगर बैलेंस चेक करना हो तो खुद से मतलब चेक कर सकते हो कि आपके गूगल में मतलब अकाउंट में कितने पैसे हैं और कितने ट्रांजेक्शन किए हुए।
I think just to share better than what I can describe straight from what we see on the field, how these different personas really are within that same group, within those same villages. And what we want to do with the persona mapping and the way we looked at this research is to really build nuanced end user data, look at the kinds of indicators that can help locate them, but also how this can lead to tailored content and tailored interventions, really a tailored strategy for customer engagement. I think for not just for training interventions, but for any customer engagement strategy, how one can speak to the customer with the right kind of nudge. And over time, also building for any field workers, whether they're trainers, whether they're sales officers, simple heuristics that can help them understand and locate where a person falls within these. I know I'm a little short on time. I'll just go a little faster on. I wanted to also share some of the next steps we did, where for us it was, for it, we didn't want to stop at the personas. We said, okay, now we know that these are the 4 types of personas. What next? And we felt our next critical piece was to say, how do you then, at the level of a larger portfolio, at the level of a market, of a village, of a geography, how do you start to identify the distribution within these? And so we wanted to arrive at simple indicators that can help us do this. And one of our experiments that yes, you can go to the next. We did this over, again, a 6-month period or across close to 1,500 households. And we went through a multi-step process of building out a pilot survey followed by a detailed survey and running several rounds of machine learning and statistical analysis to arrive at key variables that can help us locate personas. Again, this has been tested across Swadhaar's networks, the ability that gives us to test that scale and say, okay, this is something that we do feel is viable and something that can work. I'll just go through this quickly. Our pilot survey really began with a larger set of questions and a range of indicators that we looked at, placing the questions within. Based on what we found in the pilot, we developed a detailed, if you can go to the next, a quantification survey, which came down to 10 questions. This is something that we took across more than 1,000 households and ran through many different rounds of analysis. This really helped us arrive at some of the linkages between the location of the persona and the variables that we looked at. Rohit, if you can go to the next slide. Our own teams of in-house trainers actually conducted some of this research. And yes, you can go ahead. Just to give you a glimpse of some of the types of analysis that went in, we did multiple rounds of trainings for our surveyors. We did small sample testing to ensure that questions, and in this case particularly, we took a long time to arrive at, for example, the 4 answer options for every question to ensure that they were asked precisely, the same words were used, and so that we could have, a high degree of veracity in the kind of information that came in. All our interviews were recorded. We went back to, do quality checks. We then used, and we worked with Final Mile, who are our behavior science expert partners on this. They use different statistical softwares like RapidMiner to build our decision trees. And next slide. And really look at that range of variables that came in and the weightage that we were then able to give it in the location of the personas. This really helped us then arrive to come from those 23 questions to 5 questions that with close to 76% confidence can help you locate a person on that persona matrix. And for us, this was very interesting. We particularly kept focus of keeping these questions very simple. Again, something that is not too sensitive to ask someone, particularly with financial questions. There's always a hesitance to share that. So we wanted to be very mindful of the fact that this should be something that someone on the field can ask easily while filling out a form, while even in a casual conversation. And while, what was interesting is for us, even before we did this exercise, questions like how many financial products do you have were a key part of our understanding of customers. We used to say, okay, more products means a greater degree of access. but really, does that then mean greater agency or usage? And that was where we also brought in, for example, a question around who took the decision to take those products. And that starts to add really that layer of nuance when put together gives you a far better understanding. And so this whole exercise, as we took it across Swadha, I just wanted to share a quick glimpse from what we found in our own testing across the 3 states, that we found close to a 15 to 20% range of users fell within the influencer category. A larger chunk of almost 35% actually fell within the indifferent manager category, which was quite interesting to us because we also felt that they're at that marginal point of easily being able to shift into higher, greater digital literacy, higher financial usage. And then almost an equal split between the personas 1 and 2, which is the observer and fighter. Now, I can come back to this later. Yeah, sorry, I think I went on mute. We then took this quantification to the next step, which was to say, okay, now I know the personas that are there. I know how I'm able to easily identify them. How do I then take this into the design of interventions, into how I engage with customers? And to do this, we again went through a long on-ground experiment and process. And Rohit, if you can go to the next slide. We used a range of a series of trainings and interactions on the ground. We did this with some of our most experienced trainers at Swadhaar, but also working using the variables. We identified groups of customers within each personas and worked closely with them over a few month period to test out different cues, different nudges, their understanding of different barriers, and testing out actually different content strategies with them to finally arrive at a broader sort of framework and insight around this. Yeah, you can go to the next. And I'll just go through this. A lot of this is actually, I'm just going to, it's also in our reports that we have in our Banking of First series. We've mapped out again various kind of social demographic cues for each persona, but also specifically looking at financial engagement. What is their typical product ownership like? What is their level of engagement with different financial services right now? And looking at the kinds of cues through this of what we want to drive. So with the observer, it's basic interaction. With the fighter, it's just greater regular engagement with services. With the manager, the indifferent manager's greater relevance of services. And the influencer wants to look at long-term resilience. I'm appeal, this idea of pension, this idea of longer-term goal planning. And so really also looking at the different levers for change that each of these personas have. We've looked at, across just building overall agency, not just in financial work. How do you start to, within that conversation and within the engagement strategy, build those different messages of greater agency for them? How do you actually start to create that enabling context, and what are the kinds of, sometimes it's as simple as in the content video, the husband turns to the wife and says, "Tumhe kya lagta hai? Hame kya karna chahiye?" What are the kinds of cues that we need within training content, but also within conversations with them, whether it's on digital channels through messages to reinforce these. Next slide. Yes, I think we've covered this. We can go to the next. I think just wanted to share a little bit of the broad approach that we're actually also developing a whole library of content modules based on this. Our pilot modules are up and ready to share. They've been tested again. They're being used across Swadhaar's networks. We're looking at a range of different micro-learning strategies using voice, text, video, using quantification, again, some of those variables built into a digital platform onboarding process itself. So content delivery, again, becomes customized at the back end. And within the content itself, we looked at 3 very simple parameters of building a value proposition for an idea. And for example, if I'm talking to someone about insurance. Insurance is a concept that's sometimes quite abstract or intangible for someone to understand. But how do I build a simple value proposition? How do I then start to talk about product features? And then for the more advanced customers, how do I go into aspects of product literacy, process literacy, where, what happens if I miss a premium? What happens if I want to actually claim insurance? We go through our different modules, we cover a lot of this. And within the design of the content itself, we've been testing different cues, a simple call to action, ensuring that there's not more than 3 information points to remember at one time so that recall and learning becomes stronger. We're testing out recurring characters, to build that sense of a longer term story, that idea of almost trust in a virtual influencer of sorts. And we have Sarita, through which we are doing that in some of our own content. Simple brand building, this idea of reinforcing in Swadhaar's content, the Swadhaar colors and contexts that are very relevant to them. And I'll just pause here. I think this is where I wanted to actually really open it out to the group, in some of how we've envisioned as the value care proposition and use cases we see for personas, not only in financial literacy interventions, but I think for any service delivery, any financial service interaction with that customer, how this understanding can almost become a plug and play to any process where I say, okay, I want to sell GOAT microinsurance to a certain segment. Can I bring in elements of this to actually start to find which customers are more ready and how I can speak to them in the best way possible? And I know I'm way past time, Trisha, sorry. I'll just pause there.
Oh, but this was super fascinating, and I have so many thoughts that I would want to speak to you about. Meanwhile, we have a couple of questions in the chat
Yeah.
box. There's a question from Tanuja. Tanuja, would you like to voice out your question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Urmee, for the presentation. It was really very interesting. So I know that you did talk about the various factors and how the household is also influencing the decision making. But what I'm not clear on is how exactly did you control for this? Because this is something that would vary, right? Definitely across women. And how would you actually know whether sort of the end decisions that they're making, right, is say either coming from that increased autonomy or from what the family's overall objective is or influence is? So how exactly did you control for that and also manipulate it, in the interventions?
Absolutely. No, and I think the first piece there is that it's a long process. A lot of this is, and almost to go back to that graphic that we had of the cyclical movement, where let me actually first answer the first part of your question. In terms of the household, if you recall the survey that we did, a big part of what we looked at was mapping the woman's voice within the household. And so, we actually, rather than control for the household to say we spoke only to the woman, we wanted to actually speak to the household as a whole. And we looked at dynamics between the household and the woman. And that's also how we arrived at that understanding of the external context and internal self-efficacy as that key balance that starts to change. And moving from that, then ensuring that every small nudge or step starts to build that, say in the case of a passive observer who starts at the smallest point of the lowest point of self-efficacy, those small steps of maybe making small transactions. I'm now going to save 500 rupees for Diwali to buy something for my children. But now that I've taken those steps, in our intervention design, the peer group plays a big role for that persona, where it's not only the steps she takes alone, but when she's linked to others around her that are taking similar steps, she finds a certain degree of support and agency in even doing that jointly, which over time leads to that. And I think it goes without saying, we don't believe that this is a, social context, social norms are something that will not just, the 2 rounds of training are not going to do away with that. But it's really about saying that there is a way for us to, in a simple way, start to design nudges that can still, within that same context, start to increase the amount of self-efficacy that she has. So hopefully that answers a little bit. I know it's a small answer to a large and complex topic.
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much.
Great. We have time for, I think, one more question, and Jessica has already penned something in. Jessica, would
Yeah.
you like to come and ask a question?
Yes, thank you, Trisha, and thanks, Urmi, for such an interesting and insightful presentation. So I've read about Swadhaar, but I didn't know much about it before, and like super interesting to know more. My question is regarding the changes that you see with respect to the digitalization and technological progress that we see in the financial landscape, and how it is impacting, say, financial literacy, behavior, and decision making, especially for women, and any insights that you have seen from your research and studies. So happy to learn about that more.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a topic also that's very of great interest to us. In the persona mapping itself, we actually consciously chose to not bring in technology access because we looked at primarily the financial services engagement. So even if I am engaging with services by going to a bank or a BC or digitally, we kind of looked at it as levels of engagement. But we're actually currently doing this very interesting survey on mapping out mobile phone ownership and usage, and again, mapping that onto the personas. Because I think, like you said, that revolution that has happened, I think, has made access so easy and so almost ubiquitous in terms of the way that people can deal with it. But it's also led to a lot of fraud. And again, so how is it that people are really balancing that? I think the indifferent manager persona is one where I find it comes together in the most interesting way, because one of these surveys that I conducted myself, she was showing me how this lady whose husband works outside, she showed me on YouTube कि देखो मैंने ये I'm going for a wedding, मेरी बेटी ने चूड़ी देखी, मैंने फ्लिपकार्ट से ऑर्डर भी किया है बाजू वाले के घर में, but she's very scared to make any UPI payment on it because she says no, मुझे इसमें सब में नहीं पड़ना है. So there's this there's increasing amounts of digital literacy, and I think that makes it actually almost a great potential for us to be able to leverage that openness to digital channels and that digital literacy to bring them and make them active customers of financial services. So I think that segment particularly is almost ripe for moving into active ownership and usage. And I think they can really become for anyone designing products for that segment, I think they're a very interesting group to look at.
Thank you, Urmee. Yeah.
Right, so we have a couple of minutes left. So if anyone wants to come in with a quick question, now's your time.
Hey, hi.
Shilpa?
Yeah, Tiffin, hi, Trisha, nice to see you. Hi, Urmee. I'm sorry.
Hi.
First of all, full disclosure, I joined at 3:30. I missed the first half of your
No
session.
worries.
But I'm very excited to see. I mean, it's always nice to know. First of all, I'm delighted that Swadhaar even has a chief knowledge officer. I didn't realize that they did. And, it's really nice that the work is being enriched by insights like this. So here's my question, right? I mean, it's a very practical one. While I've seen a dime a dozen persona studies, I mean there are tons of these out there, right? I mean, even non-Swadhaar and otherwise, right? This is what is it that you are doing to ensure that these learnings actually get used by the product designer, the business team? I mean, how do you weave this knowledge into day-to-day business transactions? Because that is where the cycle breaks, right? Because I think a lot of this we know, and even the business office, even the business guys or the product guys will agree with you on a lot of these things. But the issue is that then why still don't you use these personas? Why aren't you, for example, how does a business guy find that the one of the four personas in the market, right? Do you have a practical toolkit that you give them to say that if you're looking for this kind of a person, this is what you should be looking for? So that's really my question. How does this knowledge translate into practice, and what are some of the systems you guys have put into place? Because I think you're already clearly ahead of the curve to ensure that that thinking gets institutionalized, not just with you, but with the actual practitioners in the NBFC. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I think it's a great question for us. It was the first thing we did when we said persona mapping. I think the first thing for us was to say, this is not going to be just a report where you develop the personas and it sits there and you're like, okay, great, now, you can do what you will with it. Which is why for us, when we looked at this, the idea was almost to say, how do you take it to its implementable finish? And which is why we brought in that aspect of quantification to say it doesn't stop at the persona. You then say, how do I actually identify? And that those variables that we identified as key to being able to locate someone on a persona, we at Swadhaar have tested across 3 different, using them as indicators at a portfolio level, using them pre-training in terms of a geography level to say, I'm going to train in this area. Can I test this out and see what the mix of participants is like before I go in? And also using it in a simple manner of just heuristics at a trainer level, at a field officer level. And so exactly like you said, Sipa, I think sometimes the biggest bottleneck is that this, saying make it tailored, make it customized sounds so good, but when you try to turn it into a business process, the kind of resources it needs, what is it, when I take it from 4 trainers to 400, how do I still ensure quality? How do I ensure that? And so I think for us, we came at this from the angle of let's work backwards from this working at 400 trainers. So we wanted to very much do that and also say, okay, I located the customer, but then what? What else do I do? And that's why we looked at customer engagement design, customer content design, and how do you build those nuanced nudges into that. So at the end of the day, I can say, here's a curriculum that actually will pull together a lot of the learnings, and you can still be assured that you're transferring some of this knowledge, but doing it in a way that is resource light and scalable. And so again, and I think conversations like this are actually a big step of us actually being able to understand use cases and utility across other stakeholders also. So I'd love to keep connecting and answering more questions.
Absolutely. Thank you. That helps. Just one very quick follow-up.
Shilpa, I'm so sorry. You will have to connect online because we are at
All
time.
right. Thank you
But
so
thank
much.
you for that brilliant question. And Urmee, I think the operative word is actionable. And from what we've heard, it's so the resource and the time intensive business of user segmentation and persona mapping for startups, most often it becomes something that they can't engage in. And the fact that we are able to, with the kind of machine learning models that are available, are able to boil all of that down to 5, say a set of 5 questions that will give you these key indicators about your target customer. I think that is extremely valuable. And I think part of this forum, what it really sort of sets out to do is take these kinds of insights to folks, to startups who would be able to action on these. So great. Thank you so much for joining us this evening and delivering this wonderful talk. And thanks everyone else for joining as well.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask Rohit to just paste our microsite link into the chat. That also has, thank you. I think he's already done that. Thanks, Rohit. So again, you can look at the reports there. Please, our emails are there. Please reach out to us. We'd love to stay connected. Thank you, Trisha. It was wonderful to take our initial conversations into this session and have this chat. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Pleasure to have.